Hi, my name is Martin Perhiniak. Today we are going to talk about how to paint clouds in Photoshop. First of all, whenever you start working on something, it's always good to get some inspirational material, so to study what you would like to paint. It's always good to focus whenever you practice painting, to focus on specific things like clouds, for example. And as you can see, I just show you a couple of images here as inspiration, and just to see the variety of colors, the possible colors in the sky, and also the endless and really interesting shapes that you can see in clouds. So this is just an inspiration, but it's a good example of how to collect some images to use them as a reference, and from these references you can store these images in your head, or just keep them on a separate screen, or maybe even print it out and keep it on your desk or on your wall. And whenever you want to paint something, it's always good to keep these references close to you. So now that we looked at these references, we can start creating clouds in Photoshop, and it will be a fast version of the recording that I did, but you will be able to follow me. And in this tutorial I'm just going to create something very simple, composition, and with also simple colors. But you can always take this a bit further and use more interesting and dramatic colors, like what you can see on some of these images here. So let's get started. And as you can see, first I start with the gradient, which I'm going to use on my background layer. I just set up this gradient, a linear gradient, and it's up to you what kind of gradient you use, but most of the times it's good to use something darker on the top and brighter on the bottom. Then I'm going to create another layer, and I make a selection on this layer just to fill that area in with a brown color, because I would like to have here in the foreground grass, or this plant, so it's like a field. And I'm using a brush, and I'm just using scattering on the brush to make sure it's scattered around, and I can draw it easily and quickly. And I'm using also jitters on the angle and size, and even on the jitter between the foreground and background colors. And now again on a separate layer I started drawing the clouds. As you can see, I'm just using a simple brush. You can obviously create custom brushes for painting clouds. I just intentionally wanted to show that even without a specific custom brush, you can create fairly good results with a simple circular brush. As you can see, I'm using opacity on 30%, and I'm using a soft edge brush, not completely soft edge. It's somewhere between the two, so it's a soft edge brush but not completely. And as you can see, I'm changing the color of the brush, so if you only draw with white, then you won't get a realistic result. You should always combine colors. Like I even used brownish colors on the clouds as a reflection of the fields, the colors of the fields, because there's always the colors of the ground always reflected on the clouds, and vice versa. So it's always good to combine these together. And as you can see, I'm also using the mixer brush, as you've seen it in previous episodes of this series. That's a really useful way to blend colors together that you already have on your layers. And the main thing what you need to remember is to use the mixer brush with the sample all layers option that you see on the top whenever I use this tool. And I use also the dodge and the burn tool just to create highlights and shadows on the clouds. As you can see, I'm using the dodge tool on the edges, and then again I switch back to the mixer brush tool just to blend again together the details. And all these details that I'm using for the clouds are on one layer, so I don't use separate layers for it. I just have the sky color in the background, and on the top I have the field, and between these two layers I have the clouds. And basically now I'm doing the same thing, so I'm going through all these clouds with the same technique. So painting with colors first with the brush tool, then merging them together with the mixer brush tool, and using dodge and burn to emphasize or increasing the contrast. Okay, so you can easily see how I do the same thing on all of these clouds on the canvas. And again, as I said, try to be brave with the colors that you use on the clouds. If you have a look at again the references that I showed in the beginning, or if you just simply search for images online and just type in clouds or dramatic clouds or something like that, you can easily find amazing references for color usage, and also for the shapes and forms that you can see in the sky. Again, this is a very default setting, so just very simple shapes and colors on the clouds, because I just wanted to make sure that you see how easy it is to create a setting like this. And in previous episodes we were talking about custom brushes. Now obviously for clouds you can easily create your own custom brushes to make the whole process a bit faster and maybe easier. But it's always fun to start completely from scratch with a simple brush. Now you can see that I use the mixer brush tool again just to soften out my clouds, and it's really important to use the sample all layers option, because otherwise you won't be able to mix the colors together. The only disadvantage of this tool is that you will also have blue colors, the colors of the background, showing up on the clouds layer. So if you later on change your mind and you want to change the background color, you will need to affect also the clouds layer, because the colors are also appearing on that layer. That's a disadvantage. Now you can see how interestingly you can use the dodge tool to create those little details to make it more realistic. So I'm just drawing over and I'm making tiny little details, adding these tiny little details on the clouds, which will make it more realistic. You can see in the background I also added some details, extra details. Now again I switch back to mixer brush, and then again I'm switching back and forth between these tools. So brush, mixer brush, dodge and burn. Basically these are the tools that I use for clouds, but there are so many different ways and techniques to paint clouds in Photoshop. So this is just one way to do it, and I found this quite simple way to do it. And altogether this painting took me around half an hour. I just made it 3 times faster than real time, just to see the whole painting process in this tutorial without being boring. So you can see again I work over some of the details with the mixer brush, blending details together. And in this tutorial I'm not really focusing on advanced color options and techniques on clouds, but if you study clouds you will see that how the colors change on the clouds the further they get from the viewer. So you can also play with the colors in the distance, use different colors there. And if you have a foreground with the ground itself, you can use dodge and burn, or as I do it separately on a separate layers, I use black and white to brighten and darken the ground. I just want to create the impression of shadows on the ground. So the shadows of the clouds reflected on the ground. And again, it's just a nice touch that makes it a bit more interesting and more realistic. And with clouds, it is really important to try to make your painting random. So try to make the shapes completely random, and you don't need to search for a pattern in them or create a pattern with them. As you can see, I'm trying to increase the contrast and change the global colors a bit with adjustment layers. I'm just used levels to increase the contrast, and I used hue saturation to change the colors. The only problem with the adjustment layers is that you will have to turn off the sample all layers option for the mixer brush tool, because you can't use it if you have the sample all layers option turned on. It will add strange colors because of the adjustment layers. So it's good to turn this option off. It still works, so without the sample all layers option turned off, or with the sample all layers option turned off, you can still use the mixer brush tool, but it's better to blend or merge together the background layer and the clouds layer. That's what I did. If you look at the layers panel, you can see that's happened. So you have to be flexible whenever you work in Photoshop. So if you want to keep the adjustments non-destructive, then you have to merge the layers together and use the mixer brush tool. So that's all, and this is my final result for this quick presentation of how to paint clouds in Photoshop. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope I could show you some techniques that you find useful. And definitely this tutorial is an inspiration mainly, so the technique itself is not difficult. The most important thing is to get to Photoshop and try and practice doing this. So spend some time on it, and try to do it several times. The first time it won't be perfect. If you do it for the first time, try it at least 5 times. And as I said, it's really important to look for references and get inspired by these amazing forms, shapes and colors that you can see in the sky. So thanks a lot for your attention. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I hope we will meet in the next episode. So see you soon.